Easter brunch at my mother's house is a tradition: pastel tablecloth, crystal pitchers of orange juice, and the scent of glazed ham mingling with fresh lilies. I'd chosen my pale blue silk blouse that morning, the one that felt smooth and cool against my skin, paired with white trousers. I told myself it was for the season, but really it was armor. The kind that says I'm fine. I'm in control. The dining room buzzed with overlapping voices. My sister-in-law, Emily, was refilling her coffee. Dad was telling the same story about the year the Easter Bunny forgot our house. I was halfway through buttering a hot cross bun when my brother, Jason, cleared his throat. He had that look, the one from childhood when he just dared me into something ridiculous. "So," Jason said, grinning like he'd solved the family's biggest problem, "I've decided. Rachel's gonna be our nanny for the year. Free of charge. Best aunt ever, right?" Laughter rippled around the table, but not from me. My hand froze mid-butter. The silver knife caught the sunlight, blinding for a second. I forced a smile, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes. Inside, there was a flash of heat in my chest, part shock, part that old, familiar sting of being volunteered without consent. My mother chuckled. "Oh, honey, you're so good with kids. This will be perfect." I sipped my coffee instead of answering. Bitter. Too bitter. They had no idea who they were really talking to anymore. I wasn't always this quiet in moments like that. There was a time years ago when I believed if I just spoke up clearly enough, my family would listen. That illusion broke one summer afternoon in Mom's backyard. I was 23, freshly graduated, juggling 2 part-time jobs while applying for internships. Jason had stopped by with Emily. They were exhausted, new parents to a colicky baby. "We just need you for a couple of weeks," he'd said casually, rocking the stroller with his foot. "You're between jobs anyway." I'd laughed nervously. "Jason, I'm not between jobs. I'm working too. And I can't." "Oh, come on." Mom had cut in from the kitchen window. "Rachel, you've always been so good at helping out. It's just family." The lump in my throat swelled. My hands, resting on the patio table, started to tremble. "I am helping, but I can't drop everything. I have bills, deadlines." Jason had smirked, that teasing older brother tone masking something sharper. "It's not like you have a real job yet. You've got time." The sting hit deeper than I expected. It wasn't the first time they dismissed my work, my plans, my boundaries. In that moment, I realized they saw me less as an adult with her own life and more as a resource, on standby, free of charge. I remember gripping the thin silver chain around my neck, the locket my grandmother, Evelyn, had given me the week before she passed. Inside was a tiny slip of paper with her handwriting. "Your time is your treasure. Spend it where it's valued." I had smiled politely that day, just to end the argument, but something shifted inside me. That night, alone in my apartment, I pulled out my laptop and made a list. Jobs I wanted. Skills I needed to learn. Cities I might move to. It wasn't a dramatic storming out moment. No slam doors, no big speeches. Just a quiet, private vow. I would stop being the person everyone assumed would be available, all the time for free. A week later, I applied for a paid internship in Boston, 3 states away. I didn't tell my family until I'd been accepted. Jason laughed like I'd joined the circus. Mom said, "We'll see how long that lasts." But I packed anyway. I wore the locket every day that first year, a cool, steady weight against my skin. It reminded me that I was allowed, no, entitled, to guard my time as fiercely as my bank account. They didn't know it then, but that was the first step toward the life I live now. Boston was colder than I'd imagined. Not just the weather, but the way the city seemed to size you up before letting you in. I rented a tiny studio apartment with a drafty window and a view of a brick wall, but it was mine. The internship paid barely enough for groceries, yet it was a start. I worked at a marketing agency, mostly handling coffee runs and data entry at first. Still, I studied everything. How the senior strategists pitched to clients, the way graphic designers pulled color palettes from a brand story, how to read analytics like a second language. At night, I'd come home, reheat leftover soup, and take online courses until my eyes blurred.
Copywriting.
Social media algorithms. Branding. I knew if I was going to make a real career out of this, I had to learn more than anyone expected. It was during one of those late nights that I met Claire Thompson. She was a senior consultant at the agency, sharp as glass, with a smile that made you feel seen. She noticed me hunched over my desk long after hours, scribbling notes. "You're not just trying to survive here, are you?" she asked one evening. I shook my head. "I want to know how it all works. I want to be good at this." She leaned against the doorway, studying me. "Good. Then stop fetching coffee and start sitting in on my meetings." Claire became my mentor, the first person in my professional life who didn't just see my potential but invested in it. She pushed me into uncomfortable spaces, presenting to clients, leading brainstorms, negotiating contracts. I stumbled plenty of times, but she never let me shrink back into the background. By my second year, I'd landed my own accounts. The first check I got from a project I'd managed entirely by myself felt heavier than any paycheck before. I deposited it, then called my grandmother's old voicemail, still active on my aunt's line, just to say, "I think you'd be proud." I posted nothing about it online. When family asked how Boston was, I kept my updates modest. "Work's busy. The city's great." No mention of the awards our campaigns were winning, or the way my salary had doubled in 18 months. That habit stuck even as I moved into my own one-bedroom with a balcony and a skyline view. Even as I opened my own boutique branding agency at 29. Even when I signed my biggest client yet, a tech startup whose launch campaign went viral in a week. I learned to savor my wins privately, not out of shame, but because they were mine. No one could twist them into obligations or favors owed. By the time Jason's Easter brunch announcement rolled around, my calendar was booked 6 months ahead. My team was thriving. My bank account was healthier than I'd ever dreamed. But to my family, I was still just Rachel, the helpful little sister with flexible time. And that was exactly how I'd wanted it, until that moment. I didn't say yes or no at Easter brunch. I let Jason enjoy his little moment, the family's laughter, the nods of approval. I kept sipping my coffee, tasting that bitter edge, and filed the moment away. 2 days later, I called him. "Before I commit to anything," I said evenly, "come by my place Saturday morning. Bring the kids. We'll talk." He hesitated, probably picturing my apartment as it was years ago, the shoebox with peeling paint. Sure. Emily and I can do that." That Saturday, I opened my front door to Jason's wide-eyed silence. The kids barreled past him into my sunlit living room, where floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Boston skyline. My cream sofa and glass coffee table sat on a hand-woven rug I'd bought from a trip to Morocco, the one I'd taken after my agency hit its first million in revenue. Jason stepped inside slowly, his eyes scanning the space. The shelves were lined with hardcovers and design awards, the walls dotted with framed campaign posters. On my desk sat a sleek computer setup, 2 monitors glowing with branding layouts in progress. Emily joined him, holding their youngest on her hip. "Wow, this is not what I expected," she said softly. I smiled, pouring coffee into stoneware mugs. "What exactly did you expect?" Jason scratched the back of his neck. "I don't know. Something smaller. Simpler. You've been, low-key for years." "That's because I wanted it that way," I replied, setting the mugs on the counter. "I run a branding agency now. I've got a team of 12. We handle national campaigns. My time isn't exactly sitting around waiting for assignments, especially unpaid ones." His brow furrowed. "You're saying you can't help?" "I'm saying—" I leaned on the counter, meeting his eyes. "I can't give up a year of my life, my business, my clients, for free childcare. That's not just helping. That's a full-time job. And I already have one that I built from the ground up." Emily shifted awkwardly, glancing around again. "You've done really well for yourself." I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the silence stretch. "Yes, I have. And I'm proud of it. But I didn't get here by saying yes every time someone decided my time was theirs to claim." Jason's expression wavered between surprise and defensiveness. "We just thought you don't have kids. You've got flexibility." "Stop right there." I cut in, my tone calm but firm. Flexibility doesn't mean availability. And not having kids doesn't mean my time has less value. My schedule is full because I've worked for it to be full. If you need help, we can talk about hiring someone. Maybe I can recommend people. But I'm not your free nanny. The kids were sprawled on the rug by now, building Lego towers. The youngest giggled, the sound light and innocent, making my chest ache just a little. I loved them, but love didn't erase boundaries. Jason looked around the room again, as if the apartment itself was proof that I'd become someone he didn't quite know. You really built all this without telling us? I smiled faintly. Some things are easier to grow when they're protected. Now you're seeing the result. Emily's eyes softened. I get it. I didn't before, but I do now. Jason let out a slow breath, rubbing his jaw. Guess I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything, I said, straightening up. But you do owe it to yourself and your family to respect the work people do, whether it's for a paycheck or not. The kids cheered as their Lego tower stood without collapsing. I glanced at them and back at Jason. You'll figure out the childcare, I added, but I'm not the solution you announced over ham and hot cross buns. Jason didn't leave right away. He sat on the edge of my sofa, elbows on his knees, as if trying to piece together the version of me he thought he knew with the one sitting across from him now. Okay, he said finally. If you're not doing it for free, what would it take? I almost laughed, not in mockery, but in disbelief that we'd finally arrived at the part where my time was negotiable. I set my coffee cup down and folded my hands in my lap. First, I said, you'd have to treat it like any other professional arrangement. That means a contract, set hours, and agreed-upon compensation. No last-minute calls. No assuming I can drop everything because you're in a bind. Jason frowned. You're my sister. We're not gonna... Then hire a sitter. I cut in. Because if you want me, it's on my terms. And second, I'd only agree if you and Emily put just as much effort into creating a sustainable childcare plan for when I'm not available. I'm not your forever safety net. Emily shifted the baby to her other hip, her voice careful. That actually sounds reasonable. What else? I thought for a moment, feeling the weight of years where my needs had been last on the list. Third, you both need to start respecting the time and work of everyone in this family. That means mom, dad, me, each other. No more, she's just between jobs jokes. No more assuming someone's free because their work doesn't look like yours. Jason let out a low sigh, rubbing his temples. You're making this official. It is official, I replied. My time is my most valuable asset. I've spent too many years giving it away to people who didn't see its worth. I'm not doing that anymore. He leaned back, looking at Emily. I didn't realize you felt like we took advantage. You didn't have to realize it, I said, my voice soft but steady. You benefited from it. And it's not entirely your fault I allowed it. But that's done now. Silence settled for a moment. The kids were still playing, the clink of Legos breaking the tension. Emily was the first to nod. If we did this, paid, scheduled, respecting your time, would you consider helping at all? I considered it, letting the quiet stretch long enough for them to feel the weight of the decision. Maybe.
Part-time.
A few hours a week if it fits my schedule. And you'd have to cover my transportation if I'm coming to your place. Jason's eyebrows shot up, but he didn't argue. Instead, he nodded slowly. All right. I guess we can work with that. It wasn't victory in the cinematic, triumphant sense. There were no gasps or dramatic speeches. But in that moment, I felt the balance shift, from being the one who adjusted, accommodated, bent without breaking to the one who set the terms. I reached for my coffee again, the ceramic warm in my hands. Good. Because from now on, we're going to treat each other like adults with real lives. Not like the roles we were assigned when we were kids. Jason gave a short, almost reluctant smile. You've changed. I met his gaze.
No.
I've just stopped hiding it. The following week, I noticed small changes. Jason sent me a text before calling, asking if I had time to talk. Emily emailed me a proposed schedule for occasional childcare, complete with rates they were willing to pay. It wasn't just about the money. It was the acknowledgement that my time had value. Even Mom's tone shifted. One evening, she called not to request a favor, but to tell me she'd bragged about my agency to her neighbor. "She's thinking of hiring you," Mom said, almost sheepish. "I didn't realize how much you've built." Neither did they. That was the point. Over the next month, the dynamic softened. Jason didn't push. Emily respected my no when I declined a last-minute Saturday babysitting request. And I found myself saying yes to the things I genuinely wanted to do, like taking the kids to the science museum or baking cookies with them on a rainy afternoon, because they were choices, not expectations. One evening, after wrapping up a client call, I opened my jewelry box. The locket was still there, cool against my palm. I clicked it open, reading my grandmother's faded handwriting. "Your time is your treasure. Spend it where it's valued." It struck me that the lesson had been less about guarding my time from others and more about choosing where to give it freely, without resentment, without the weight of obligation. That weekend, I invited Jason and Emily over for dinner. The kids ran circles around my living room while we ate pasta at my dining table. No talk of schedules, no subtle digs about my flexibility. Just family, laughter, and the clink of forks against plates. When Jason stood to leave, he lingered at the door. "I meant what I said, you've changed. But I think we needed you too." I smiled. We all needed me too. After they left, I stood by the window, the city glittering beneath the night sky. I thought of the girl who once sat at a backyard table, hands shaking as her brother dismissed her ambitions. I thought of the quiet vow I'd made to protect my time like it was gold. And I thought of the woman I'd become, someone who could say no without apology, yes without fear, and stand in her own worth without needing anyone's permission. The locket hung from my fingers, its weight familiar, grounding. I fastened it around my neck, the chain warm against my skin. Some treasures you spend carefully. Others you keep close.